Hi, I'm Mike North, and today I'm going to begin a series of videos that will walk you through the internals of various areas of the Ember.js framework. The reason that this might be useful information for you is that having a better understanding of what's going on under the hood will help you write code in your application that is in closer alignment with the foundational ideas that are operating behind the scenes. In order to kick this discussion off, first I want to look at what is different about a library versus a framework. When you build a web application, or any application for that matter, using a quilt of libraries, essentially you're taking these pieces of finished code that may not necessarily have been designed to work together, and it's your job as the application developer to stitch these together, to write little pieces of code that will adapt from one library's convention to another. And this was a very common pattern that was followed, before frameworks started becoming popular, right? Before we started seeing opinionated frameworks. And in fact, there are popular variants of this today. For example, in the React ecosystem, we can see that, React is just a Vue library, and quite a good one at that. But we have to bring in, a router, which is separate from React. We have to bring in something like Redux to manage state. Sometimes we're able to rest on web standards like fetch, but we'll have to bring a polyfill in for something like this. And then oftentimes, certain areas of the app don't have a ready-to-go piece to handle a certain concern for us. For example, booting an app up and getting started. So oftentimes you have to rely on community solutions for this kind of thing. Stitching libraries together in a quilt can turn out to be beautiful, but it can also turn out to be troublesome if the edges don't meet the way you expect them to. And although you may end up with a web application, you may not have a fun time maintaining this kind of thing because the devil's in the details when it comes to taking several different abstractions and making them all work harmoniously as one big cohesive application. In terms of contrasting a quilt of libraries versus a framework, I like to think of this as almost an inversion of what you're provided with versus what you write. So a framework, or opinionated frameworks, often provide default functionality that works out of the box, and it is your job as the application developer to customize that functionality, to extend an empty component so that it does something when it's rendered on the screen. And when we talk about hooks in the Ember.js ecosystem, this is where a lot of your code ends up going. And we have, specific aspects of the framework that are designed to handle all of these different facets of building a web application. In terms of what I'm going to talk about today, because we already have a good understanding of these important objects that we extend in order to build our app, right? We know what a route is, we know what a component is, but not a lot of people have a good understanding of the glue that holds all of these things together. That is, what is happening between, one hook being called and another hook being called. So hooks are a very common thing to find in opinionated frameworks. They are sort of an inherent result of adopting convention over configuration. You have something that works and that is completely functional. It probably doesn't do much. And by filling in some blanks, you can make this already functional thing more interesting. A point of convention over configuration, one of the goals is to improve your productivity by reducing the number of decisions that you are forced to make, right? So one of the things that I have learned over teaching lots of people how to use Ember is that people have a fixed amount of mental bandwidth that they can spend in a variety of ways. And the more of that we can devote towards making the important decisions that are of consequence to your users, the better off we're going to be. So a second place where we can get productivity is through mastering the tools that you're using. And the end result of this is that you end up making decisions that pay off the first time around, right? You end up going down the wrong road less often because you have an understanding of sort of the core ideas and the big picture of, where we're trying to go and how we do things. Part of this is understanding the idioms. And if we look at what the term idiom means in terms of just human language and how it applies to, language and culture, this is using local expressions so that you fit in, right? So this means that you act in alignment with things around you so that, you're operating in the same mode that everything else is operating in, and everyone's happy and everything kind of, no one's bumping into each other. So one of the challenges here is that frameworks are generally pretty complex, and you have to know what those local ways are in order to have a chance at aligning with them. And so that's the point of showing you all of these little walkthroughs, that the more you know about how the framework is working under the hood for you, the better you're going to be able to align with those ideas and to, express your application-specific code in some of the. Just a warning, some of what I'm going to show you, a lot of it inherently has to do with private APIs and the internals of the framework. So you should not take what I show you as an indication that you should build on these functions and you should, customize and interfere with these paths that I'm going to walk you down. It's useful to know how things work, but you're going to have a bad time if you take this as permission or indication that you should start, customizing and consuming these things directly.